So one of the things that, like, I mean, I need to research this more because I am interested in it enough to do it. But it's like, the idea is that one of the functions of your prefrontal cortex, which is also where you, like, do a lot of your decision making, your quote unquote decision making, is selecting the information to take into consideration. Yeah. So, like, there's the idea that, like, people with higher IQs, higher working memory capacity, those are different. Those are definitely different. Working memory capacity is the amount of information that you can hold, that you can, like, work with.
Yeah.
And the idea is that people with higher working memory capacity can also ignore more things than people who have a lower working memory capacity.
So less impact. The stimuli is less impact on them.
Less noise.
Yeah, less noise is like the big thing. So
more RAM equals less noise.
Okay, speaking of IQ though, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but talking again about that other talk we had where Chris was here, another point that really bothered me was the idea of, like, if you have a democratic system, that, like, he was saying that, like, you need to have people with higher IQs in charge of things. And the idea of, like, people shouldn't elect their leaders because they're not going to choose the smartest leaders. And this kind of, like, meritocratic idea of things that I don't think plays itself out in reality. I mean, someone with a really high IQ could still crash the economy for their own benefit. Like, IQ is not a measure of making things
you're more
better for people.
That's true, but it also is very often highly correlated with aptitude at a given skill.
True.
Right?
But
so
if you change...
that's, I think, what he was talking about is, like, if you give control of a company to a bunch of people with a relatively low IQ, they may not choose the best course for the company in terms of that company surviving in a competitive environment.
I agree to a large extent with that. However, I think there's a couple things that balance that out. First of all, I think people with high IQ are still going to show up as the most convincing management material to be elected into positions of leadership. I think those who do make it into positions of leadership are going to have a better incentive structure to guide their intelligence and their behavior, because the incentive structure is going to be going towards what makes it better for the workers. And, what was the last thing? Anyway, that's...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's really hard to say one way or another how that will play out. Yeah. But, you know...
the competition thing, sorry. But the last thing is that, like, there are going to be... I think if we switch to a democratic cooperative system, it would, for a while, a lot of them would probably make decisions that run into the ground. Mm-hmm. And I see that as a positive. And the reason I see that as a positive is because it's an increase in diversity. It really is an increase in market competition and choices, because I mean, a lot of, you know, the management practices we have in our hierarchical system have become homogenized. I mean, you trade executives from one company to another, and there's these playbooks, you know, and you're going to have this radical experimentation with democracy, and that's going to mean failure. But
for sure.
The ideology of a market is that failure is okay as long as it spurs the improvement through that competition.
You couldn't be able to use, it's basically, you can't use that argument against democratic co-op.
Yeah, if you're coming from the point of view of capitalism.
Exactly, as well in capitalism.
That's true. I think one of the biggest issues is we look at a lot of the ways that democracies have worked, and oftentimes they do elect really bad leaders, right? And so
that's true. But we have to get into some really sticky conversations now about what is a democracy in terms of, you know, direct democracy in a workplace versus what we call democracy in a political system.
Right.
I mean, so take America, for example. I mean, you can't call this a democracy. It's a two-party system. You know, the majority doesn't even always carry the vote.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Donald Trump getting less than the majority, and he's president. So
definitely.
To use those as examples of a direct democracy in function, it doesn't really make sense. But
I think it's just there's a huge
mob mentality.
And there's a lot of possibility for it to go wrong. I mean, like, not to say that our system now is perfect, of course, and comparing it to that, like, it's not to say that it's worse per se. It's just that one of the things that does work in terms of the way the capitalist system works is that it is highly merit-based when you get up into, like, competitive CEO level, you know, where, like, the best CEOs are the ones running the biggest companies, basically, and they are really, really
That's
intelligent people. And
That's true.
They
But
got there
that
for a
merit,
reason.
what is that merit being directed to?
And
you
that's
know?
a bad. Like, I agree that it's not being directed in a good way.
Right.
It's just a matter of whether or not you would be sort of dumbing down the pool of talent by using that type.
Maybe
of
so. Maybe you're, maybe you have this elite upper crust of talent now. But if we have to water that down in order to make a system that serves the people better,
I mean,
and B, gives them more autonomy over their own lives, then I'm in favor of that.
Do you have to dumb down the echelons to be able to make it more moral?
And you know what? I think
Would you make that decision?
I think it would greatly, it would do the opposite to the regular worker. It would do the opposite of dumb them down. It would give them more autonomy, more interaction.
Dude, I hope to God we
I mean,
were
right now we
aiming
act
for
like
that,
robots.
right?
You can't go any lower than now.
Yeah.
So if you mean we're going to have to water down, the elites so that the common people can take a few steps up, I'm game.
Yeah,
I'm game with that.
And one of the biggest hopes that I could see is maybe that talent pool would head for other realms where they could, use their IQ better.
Right.
Because maybe being a CEO wouldn't be as rewarding anymore.
Yeah, maybe you need to go into government. Maybe you need to do different things.
Maybe become an awesome physicist now.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I mean, one of the examples I look to is what happened in ancient Athens, and what we saw there was almost the opposite, where you have these entrenched aristocrat or oligarch-based city-states, and sure you have like these elites who know what they're doing, but it got very stagnant, and they made choices based off kind of like traditions about how things work. And you have Athens coming up with this like bold, fierce, innovative, what's the word I'm looking for? Individualism. And you had people coming from nothing and becoming these, superstars in terms of the political arena. And, they made a lot of choices that benefited them that shocked other city-states because they were willing to gamble big.
Totally.
And I think there's a lot of generative capacity in that as well. But that's an age-old argument. Is it better to have concentrated power or egalitarian power?
Yeah.
And the whole arena of ancient Greece is one wonderful experiment of all those things taking place.
I also think it's interesting to think about this argument in the context of AI coming soon.
Right.
Because, what happens when that kind of hits the fan and now all of a sudden we don't really need workers at companies anymore. And then it's like, well, okay, how are you going to have a democratic co-op with 2 people, 3 people? It's basically...
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's still in the future.
It's true.
But
that is going to be
20, 30 years.
I'm assuming
maybe
we're
50.
going to create some kind of job market in that world where the jobs just are doing different things. Maybe they're now more luxury and service based.
Yeah.
Unless we think we're literally just not going to have jobs for people, and that's another alternative to talk about.
Yeah.
But as long as jobs exist, I'd rather them be run democratically.
We'll have a sweet VR system by then, so it doesn't
Yeah, so plug in and unplug.
There we go. We'll create economic systems in the VR where there aren't any AIs that people can still function in.
There you go.
Oh my god,
So
the
they
kinds of
pretend
VR.
the kinds of AI simulations. I mean, we should just have AI just try to understand as much about humans as possible and then run experiments about different kinds of systems for us to live in.
They could do that, I'm sure.
And then
Crazy.
they can put us in little batteries that are filled
Yeah.
with like gelatinous things that plug our brains in and use us for batteries. That would be great.
Why not?
We don't need them anymore.
I mean, not really.
Oh my
They're
I'm
giving
joining
us
the
what we
revolution,
need.
guys.
All we gotta do is power them. Seems fair.
For yourself.
There is definitely a piece of me that's just like, okay, so we just decided the Matrix was a good thing. Okay, cool. That's literally I'm just like, okay.
Well, it's also like
Fuck that.
if the world
That's-
is like that.
I don't see
It's so
the point
fucked
of
up.
the AI thing if that's what that's I think what the people are thinking about right there. We can't solve our problems ourselves, so we're gonna create this other thing that we don't really care because we're like no longer the
but
responsibility.
That's a tough thing though, because I
We
feel
sure
like we
did.
were able to solve our problems before our civilizational constructs. I really
Depends on what you consider solving in our problem.
Right, it was messy. Sure, I'm not saying everything was, utopian back during hunter-gatherer times, but I think that's when humans were at our best.
Boy, I don't know about that.
In terms of individual fulfillment and that kind of thing. But anthropologists do say that
Yeah, they do say that
hunter-gatherer
we-
societies are much happier
Exactly.
than modern civilization.
But
They
didn't
worked
live
less.
They worked less.
They didn't live as long.
But they worked less. They were.
I'll
happier.
take that, man. I'll take
And they had
that.
stimulation all the time. They didn't need any of this stuff because they had stimulation all the time. However, that probably also led to them dying a lot because of the things
the
that were
healthcare.
stimulating them being like a
It's
freaking
not-
Yeah.
like needing to look for food and then a lion coming and eating you.
But that just happens one
That's
day. We don't worry about it.
They definitely worried about that.
No, it was
Not-
normal for them, though. You know
Not
what I
to the
mean?
point of like dread. though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, everyone's afraid of lions, man. I'm not saying they're not afraid of lions,
Good reason.
but like, there's not that constant state of
A hippo
anxiety
ain't.
that we have in
The
civilization.
hippo ain't afraid of nothing.
I mean,
Hippopotamuses are like.
There's some
The
hippos
only
that
reason
eat
why
lions, so
You
it
think
should
that
be.
there's
Maybe.
more anxiety? That'd be
Okay,
interesting.
let me explain why I think that.
Yeah.
So in some of the anthropology papers I was reading, they were saying that there is a general lower state of anxiety in hunter-gatherer groups than in people in civilization. And they pointed to one of the main reasons of that is that they don't have the same concept of time that we do.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
And that was
I
one
can
of
see
the
that.
main sources of it for
Yeah.
us, is this idea of linear time and this idea of this existential need to improve your position.
Yeah, that's
Whereas
what
in
I was gonna
hunter-gatherers, you
say.
get your food,
Yeah.
you sit down by the fire, and you tell stories and you fuck each other.
Yeah, I mean that's one of
That's
the
what
biggest
you
things
do.
I can see is like we always. It doesn't matter at what point we are in our lives. There's always some sort of pressure.
Yeah.
It seems like I mean, you can decide whether or not to let that bother you if you're a unique individual. But most people are going to
Yeah.
feel that kind of pressure at almost all of their life until maybe they retire, and then
Yeah.
there's not like it kind of is like okay, you've done your due, and that's when we see a lot of people become as happy as they've ever been.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that's a huge one. It's like, you get a new job and it's not like, okay, well, it's like buy a house, buy a car, get a wife, have a kid. There's like all these things that it's like, you better check these things off or
Yeah.
you're not going to be happy. And people just tell you that. And so we assume that they're right
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
It's imbued in you at a
Mhm.
very young age in all
Exactly.
of your life.
So it makes sense that a hunter-gatherer society wouldn't have those kinds of pressures, and then therefore they would be a lot happier.
Yeah.
But it's also when
And
you
then
say
just being
that,
in nature all the time too is its own thing.
right. When you say that we were at our best, though, it's interesting because that's like by what measure?
So yeah, it's
If
tough.
we're at
We
our
should dig
happiest,
into that.
That's fine.
I guess I mean
that's
more,
definitely an important thing, an important metric.
Let me re-say that. I don't think that we're at our best.
Okay.
What I mean is, in my view, the things most important to me about life, I feel like we've lost, and I feel like we still have them then. And those have a lot to do with, a connection to community, a connection to nature, a sense of autonomy, and of, personal freedom.
I mean, I think those things are definitely important, and I think a huge case can be made for us establishing a society where we can have those,
Right.
and not
And that's really
necessarily
what I'm-
needing to continue to progress. Like
Yeah.
that's one of those things that we were talking about earlier. The Native Americans didn't seem to feel the need to progress endlessly like the Europeans did for whatever reason,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of it could be because of their inherent ideas on self-actualization and how to get there, as opposed to Europeans' idea of continuous improvement, right? And so whether or not one is superior to the other is hard to really say, but obviously one is more successful in creating happy, self-actualized people than
Right.
the other. And so I think definitely a marriage of the two ideas is a good
I
idea.
agree entirely.
Yeah.
And what I really come to is that I feel like that need for progression, in a large sense, it comes from us being in civilization, the construct of civilization itself. That entity, the state, the powers, structures, have their own incentives to progress. And then also, we feel the need to progress because of all the psychological things we were just talking about, that anxiety, that cultural context.
Right.
And, maybe I think it's safe to say we never would have got the benefits of that state of existence without civilization.
Mhm.
I think now we can look at that, take the benefits without the horrible negative things that cause it, and have a society more like our hunter-gatherer model in a civilizational context, and yet still be trying to, innovate, to create new things, but not maddeningly, not to the point of like risking our own extinction.
Yeah, basically the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Well, one of the big things that like I think is cool about what like Carl Jung started to like elucidate, but also what Jordan Peterson is working on now is like the idea of like being able to abstract what we can from these stories that we've been telling ourselves for a long time, like both with like religion, but also with like the hero tale and stuff like that. Well, Campbell too, I guess. Joseph Campbell is a big one too. But the idea like that I think is most relevant to like what you guys are talking about is like back in the day it was like, oh shit, I made a new kind of bow and now we kill things way easier. Sweet. Everyone in society benefits now, right? Now it's like we look around and we're like, do I have enough food? Yeah. Do I have enough water? Yeah. Do I have enough covering? Yeah. For a lot of us, not everyone, which is also like a big deal. But it's like we don't wake up every morning being like, it could be better if we could like kill more food or something like that. We have to make these more complex systems where it's like, okay, well, I could make more money. Do I want to make more money? I guess. Why not? And then so you can go and like try and figure out intellectually what would be the best thing to like work towards in like the technology company that you might not really understand what the purpose of this like new song is or this new tool is or this new whatever is, but it'll make me more money, so I guess that's benefiting society, right?
It's so abstracted too.
Exactly.
I mean, the fact that there's so many people just like trying to make ends meet and they don't see any clear way to better their circumstances is just so depressing.
I mean, like look at it's like if you look at our idols too, it's like look at like Steve Jobs or even just like those I don't think are bad ones, but like even like just like the creation of like the iPod, is that really like as big a deal as like Prometheus bringing down a torch, for humanity to now have fire? Is that really like, is that the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it on the same level, but I do think it was that idea, like that idea explosion did bring music to people in a new way.
Totally, and that's,
awesome.
I'm just saying I don't
know
I don't know if we've adapted our, I don't know if we've caught up with that kind of change in abstraction, or at least the content for that abstraction. Because if you want to take it there, it's like that gave like music, which is a great, it's a great artistic thing to give people, right? But it's not physical. It's not not the new gun, right? Which we still do anyways. But it's like, I think a lot of people would agree that that kind of stuff would be the best thing that we could make, something like that benefits everyone, rather than the few, which I think is one of the biggest parts of our society that everyone's kind of pissed off at right now. Yeah. It's like, we're not even creating things anymore that benefits everyone. We're just creating things that benefit some people.
Yeah. Right.